They walk among us quietly, not in robes or with crowns, not with armies behind them or empires beneath their feet, but with something far more dangerous: the power to see through illusion. Schopenhauer believed the world is a theater of appearances, and those who think deeply threaten the entire performance. Intelligence, true intelligence, not the kind rewarded by report cards or applauded in job interviews, but the kind that strips reality to its bones, is terrifying to society. It questions, deconstructs, and refuses to be hypnotized by the ordinary. Why does society fear such minds? Because intelligent people see the mechanisms others are enslaved to. They're not distracted by trends, rituals, or empty social validation. They look behind the curtain and ask, who built this illusion, and why am I supposed to worship it? Schopenhauer called most people mere reflections of the will, driven, unconscious, impulsive. The intelligent person, by contrast, stands apart, like a surgeon holding a scalpel to culture's skin. Their very presence threatens comfort. They ask dangerous questions like, why do we chase wealth that never satisfies? Why do we admire power that corrupts? Why are we expected to conform when conformity often means betraying ourselves? The intelligent soul is not always articulate, popular, or charming. Often they're exiled, mocked, labeled as arrogant, antisocial, or depressive. But that's only because society doesn't know what to do with someone who no longer plays the game. Such people expose the rot. They reveal that beneath our so-called progress lies fear, repression, and a deep hostility to anything that cannot be controlled. And what society cannot control, it condemns. This is why intelligence frightens, not because it harms, but because it reveals. It holds a mirror up to the world and says, look at yourself. And in that mirror, society sees its hypocrisy, its cowardice, its addiction to comfort, and it recoils. Schopenhauer argued that solitude is the natural habitat of the intelligent because the masses offer only noise, not depth. And so, the intelligent retreat, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. For to stay among the sleepwalkers too long is to start dreaming their dreams. And intelligent people know the dream is beautiful, but it's still a lie. Intelligent people are dangerous not just because they think deeply, but because they live authentically. In a society addicted to roles, masks, and scripted behaviors, authenticity is an act of rebellion. Schopenhauer believed that the masses are trapped in a never-ending performance, constantly chasing approval and avoiding rejection. They play the roles they've been handed, employee, spouse, citizen, without ever asking who they truly are. But the intelligent person disrupts this play by refusing to act. They are not interested in fitting in, because they know that fitting in often means fading away. Instead, they are obsessed with one thing: truth. And truth, in a world built on lies, is terrifying. When someone chooses to speak the truth, even if it's unpopular, uncomfortable, or ugly, they break the spell society casts on itself. They become a mirror that cannot be ignored. Intelligent people often make others feel exposed, not because they judge them, but because their presence makes pretense impossible. They don't laugh at stupid jokes, they don't follow trends they find absurd, and they don't pretend to believe what they don't. They say no where others say yes. And in doing so, they create unease. Because society does not run on truth. It runs on agreement. It runs on the illusion that we all believe the same things, value the same goals, and worship the same gods. When someone steps outside of that illusion and refuses to play along, they're seen as a threat, not because they're wrong, but because they make others question whether they've been wrong all along. Schopenhauer argued that most people hate those who make them feel ignorant, and the intelligent, by simply being themselves, often do just that. Their clarity becomes an offense. Their insight becomes a provocation. Their refusal to conform becomes a wound in the collective ego of the crowd. And so society isolates them, not because they are cruel, but because they are honest. Not because they are proud, but because they refuse to kneel before falsehood. Intelligence in this world is not just a gift, it is a burden. a lonely fire that lights the way while others are still afraid of the dark. Society is built around the idea of the average. What is normal, acceptable, predictable? It thrives on sameness, on shared values, on common habits. But intelligent people do not conform to the average. They question it, they challenge it, they see its limitations and call out its contradictions. Schopenhauer believed that the masses cling to the average because it offers safety. It is easier to be part of a crowd than to think alone. It is easier to accept tradition than to confront its flaws. But intelligent individuals are cursed with the inability to accept things at face value. They ask, why? And then they ask, why not something else? This alone makes them dangerous, because when one person begins to think differently, others might follow. The average depends on inertia, on routine, on the idea that this is just how things are. But intelligence injects doubt into that inertia. It disrupts the cycle. It whispers that life could be lived another way. This is why society often views intelligent people as arrogant or ungrateful. Not because they truly are, but because they refuse to worship the average. They refuse to be impressed by shallow accomplishments. They do not believe that owning more things or getting more likes makes a person successful. They are not dazzled by surface, they are drawn to depth. And in a world addicted to speed and noise, depth is treated like a threat. The tyranny of the average demands that everyone march to the same beat, but the intelligent person walks alone. Not out of pride, but because the beat doesn't make sense to them. They need meaning, not mimicry. They seek truth, not trends. This makes them ungovernable in a society that relies on groupthink. Schopenhauer wrote that the wise are often solitary, not because they hate others, but because they are exhausted by the performance. The average resents those who don't need its validation. It punishes those who see through its illusion. Intelligence then becomes a kind of exile, not because the intelligent reject society, but because society cannot tolerate being questioned. The average wants loyalty, not insight. It wants obedience, not awareness. And so it fears the intelligent, for they carry the one thing society cannot control, the power to think freely. The deeper an intelligent person sees, the lonelier the view becomes. This is the paradox Schopenhauer understood with piercing clarity. Intelligence does not simply open new doors, it closes many others. When a person begins to perceive the hidden mechanics of society, the lies we tell ourselves, the hollow rituals we repeat, the contradictions we silently uphold, they are no longer able to participate blindly. And this distance is not something they choose. It is something that unfolds naturally as a consequence of seeing too much. Most people find comfort in the crowd. They take refuge in shared narratives and collective illusions. But the intelligent person, once awakened to the absurdity of many social conventions, can no longer pretend. They cannot laugh at the same jokes, chase the same status markers, or speak in the same empty phrases that once passed for conversation. What once felt familiar begins to feel suffocating. It's not that intelligent people dislike others, it's that they see through the masks. They notice the insecurity behind the arrogance, the fear behind the aggression, the emptiness behind the small talk. And the more they see, the harder it becomes to belong. Society punishes clarity. It rewards conformity. So those who question too much are gradually pushed to the edges. They are called difficult, strange, too intense. They are told to lighten up or stop overthinking. But what if they cannot? What if their very mind is wired to see what others avoid? Then isolation becomes their silent companion. Not because they seek it, but because their vision has made ordinary life unbearable. Schopenhauer noted that the more intelligent a person is, the more they tend toward solitude. This solitude is not a retreat, but a necessity. In silence, they can breathe again. In stillness, they can think clearly. In solitude, they are free from the exhausting weight of pretending. But this freedom comes at a cost. It means fewer friends, deeper doubts, and the haunting realization that understanding others does not guarantee being understood in return. Intelligence becomes a double-edged sword. It sharpens perception but slices away connection. It liberates the mind but alienates the heart. And in a society that fears both truth and complexity, those who see clearly must walk alone, not because they want to, but because the world no longer makes sense any other way. There is a certain torment that comes not from ignorance, but from knowing too much. For the intelligent individual, life often feels like walking through a theater where the actors don't know they're on stage. You see the script, the lighting, the wires holding up the illusion, while everyone else claps and believes it's real. This burden of perception is not glamorous, it's heavy. It weighs down every interaction. The intelligent person can't help but notice the manipulation behind advertising, the emptiness in political slogans, the quiet despair behind forced smiles. They see how society functions not to liberate the individual, but to restrain them. Education becomes indoctrination. Religion becomes control. Media becomes distraction. And relationships become a transaction of needs disguised as love. To most people, these insights would be unbearable, so society trains them to look away. From a young age, we're taught not to question too much, not to feel too deeply, not to stray too far from what's normal. But the intelligent person doesn't have that option. Their mind keeps digging, even when they wish it wouldn't. They find patterns in chaos, irony in sincerity, contradiction in structure, and this constant awareness leads not to peace but to restlessness. It's exhausting to notice everything. It's painful to understand things that others dismiss, and it's isolating to carry truths that nobody wants to hear. This is why intelligent people often retreat, not out of arrogance, but out of necessity. Their sensitivity to the world makes them vulnerable. Too much noise, too much dishonesty, too much superficiality. It all feels like an assault on the mind. So they withdraw into books, art, nature, thought. They create their own world not out of escapism, but survival. Schopenhauer believed that suffering is inseparable from consciousness, and for the intelligent mind that suffering is amplified, because they don't just feel their own pain, they feel the world's. They carry the collective despair, the existential absurdity, the silent screams beneath society's cheerful mask. And still they walk on. Because what choice do they have? To unsee the truth is impossible. To express it is dangerous. And to bear it, alone, quietly, is often the only path left. This is the true burden of intelligence, not just seeing the world, but enduring it. Intelligent people don't fit in easily. Not because they don't want connection, but because conformity feels like slow suffocation. They resist the groupthink, the unspoken rules, the hollow rituals that keep society moving in mechanical rhythm. While others adapt for the sake of harmony, the intelligent person questions everything. Why do we do this? Who benefits? What are we avoiding by pretending this is normal? This constant interrogation makes them outsiders. Society thrives on sameness. It functions best when people follow orders, believe the script, and keep their heads down. Intelligence disrupts that order. It sees the cracks in the foundation and asks, what if we tore this down? But this makes people uncomfortable. Nonconformity threatens the tribe. It makes others question their safety, their beliefs, their identity. So the intelligent person becomes a target, not necessarily of open hostility, but of subtle exclusion. They're labeled difficult, arrogant, too intense, too serious. They're told to lighten up, to stop overthinking, to just go with the flow. But for them, the flow feels like a lie. Schopenhauer understood this deeply. He wrote that the more intelligent a person is, the more they suffer in a world ruled by mediocrity. Because intelligence doesn't just resist conformity, it exposes it. It shows how easily people trade their freedom for comfort, their individuality for acceptance. And in a world addicted to appearances, this kind of exposure is unforgivable. So intelligent people are often forced to choose silence or exile. Either they pretend not to see what they see, or they risk being pushed to the margins. Many choose silence, but some walk alone, not because they want to, but because they have to. Their mind won't allow them to live any other way. They would rather be alone with the truth than surrounded by illusion. And in that solitude, they begin to build something of their own: ideas, art, insight, integrity. They become what society cannot contain. And though they may be feared, misunderstood, even hated, they remain a necessary force. Because every time they refuse to conform, they remind the world that there is another way to live, one that values depth over comfort, authenticity over approval, and truth over belonging. The curse of intelligence is not merely the ability to understand more, it is the inability to ignore what others so easily do. The intelligent person sees too much, feels too much, and cannot unsee the contradictions embedded in everyday life. Where others find comfort in certainty, the intelligent individual finds only illusion. They observe how people speak of love but act from fear, how society praises individuality but punishes difference, how morality is preached but seldom practiced. This depth of perception becomes a source of alienation. They can't laugh at what everyone else finds funny. They don't see authority as inherently respectable. They aren't inspired by trends or motivated by approval. They feel the hollowness behind the facade, the emotional dissonance beneath the surface of so-called normalcy. Schopenhauer described this sensitivity as both gift and burden, for to perceive life more clearly is to suffer more deeply. The intelligent person becomes attuned to the hypocrisy of human interaction, the performative masks we wear, the emptiness of much conversation. They are often overwhelmed, not by complexity, but by banality, by how little people seem to think, question, or feel. This results in a chronic sense of detachment. They may sit in a crowded room and feel utterly alone, not because they lack love, but because they lack resonance. Their mind operates on a different frequency. Their emotions run deeper, their thoughts darker, their questions sharper. And this inner world, rich and intense, is rarely understood by those around them, so they retreat, not in bitterness but in necessity. Silence becomes a refuge. Books become companions. The mind becomes a sanctuary. Yet even in solitude, the pain of perception does not vanish. It only becomes clearer. They see the suffering of others more vividly, feel the collective anxiety of the world, sense the existential void that most spend their lives ignoring. And in this awareness lies both agony and wisdom. The intelligent person learns to carry the weight of perception not with pride, but with humility. For they know that seeing clearly means hurting more, but it also means living more authentically. It means choosing truth over illusion, depth over distraction, presence over pretense. And though this path is lonely, it is also real. And in a world full of shadows, reality is a kind of quiet salvation. The deeper a person thinks, the harder it becomes to find someone to think with. This is the great isolation of intelligence, not social, but intellectual. An intelligent person is not necessarily lonely for lack of company, but for lack of resonance. Most conversations are anchored in the shallow, revolving around daily routines, opinions borrowed from headlines or cliches passed off as wisdom. But the intelligent mind yearns for something more, for exploration, not repetition, for depth, not distraction. They want to ask, what is the nature of reality? Why do we suffer? What does it mean to live truthfully in a false world? But these questions are unsettling to most. They disrupt comfort, dismantle illusion, and demand thought. And thought, real thought, is rare. Because thinking is painful. It requires a confrontation with uncertainty, with mortality, with the meaninglessness that lies beneath our manic pursuit of meaning. So most avoid it. They prefer routine over reflection, entertainment over introspection, affirmation over challenge, and so the intelligent person finds themselves alone. Alone not in physical space, but in mental experience. Their thoughts have few mirrors, their depth has few bridges, and over time, this disconnect grows. They may feel like a stranger in their own culture, a wanderer in conversations that seem to orbit triviality. Schopenhauer understood this solitude well. He described the intelligent individual as someone for whom solitude is not just a choice, but an inevitability. Because the more refined your thoughts, the fewer places you can take them. This doesn't mean the intelligent person is superior. It means they are misaligned with the collective rhythm. Their questions are too big, their sensitivity too sharp, their awareness too raw. And society, preferring smooth surfaces and easy answers, finds them unsettling. This isolation is not something that can be cured by socializing more or pretending to care about things they don't. It is not a phase. It is a condition of consciousness. The intelligent person must learn not to resent it, but to understand it. To accept that their mind will often take them places others cannot follow. To embrace solitude not as exile, but as a necessity for truth. For only in that quiet, unshared space can the soul breathe deeply and the mind see clearly.